The next person is Dana Goldblatt.
Hi, Dana Goldblatt. I live at 140 William Street. And I'm here to talk to you about the fact that Walmart is funding our police now. So I thought that was worth a little bit of conversation and thought. I think the impulse is to rationalize it, to say like, well, we have police and we need them, and the police need guns, and then the guns need ammo, and once you're having to buy guns and ammo from arms dealers, then because by definition that's who sells guns and ammo, now you might as well get them for free because that's more cost effective, right? And that's sort of the rationalization steps that get us to Walmart directly funding our police department. But that I think that logic accepts as a given that, first of all, the current degree of militarization of the Northampton police, and also the number and extent of violence workers that we need in Northampton, as opposed to other kinds of workers, social workers, crisis workers, that we fund violence workers and we pay for guns and ammo, or we accept donations of guns and ammo at a pretty high rate. My question is, because of course accepting this gift of armaments from Walmart is the natural end of the logic of having this many violence workers, is how many do we really need in Northampton? We don't have citizen input into that question. I've never been able to provide citizen input into that question. How many violence workers, as opposed to crisis workers or social workers, do we want to fund in Northampton? And the reason I want input into that is because having violence workers who are implicated in arms deals or arms donations or whatever this is, those aren't my values. And having guns and ammunition flowing through our city at this rate, like water, those are not my values. And I don't remember ever being asked if it was okay with me to have this amount of violence in my city or to have this amount of violence being perpetrated in my name. And I can't see a way to get input into that. This isn't an area in which the mayor's office accepts comment, or there's no citizen review committee of the Northampton Police. There is no civilian input into how violence workers operate in Northampton. And this body has said repeatedly that they only have the power of the purse. But of course, if Walmart wants to supply endless guns and ammo, the power of the purse is worthless. So I want to know whose values these are that are being served, because they're not my values, and I don't feel like they're any of your values. I don't feel like anyone here would say we need more guns and ammo in Northampton, we need more violence workers, we need less teachers, less social workers. And I would say that these are Walmart's values. Walmart calls Northampton police an average of every day. 365 days a year, they call Walmart. And if Northampton Police Department belongs to us, then we should be able to call that off in some way. We should be able to stop this. We should be able to say fewer police, fewer guns, less ammo. And somehow we can't. No one seems to be able to do that. And I would say that that's because the police don't belong to us.
Ms. Goldblatt?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for those comments. The next person is Amy Bookbinder, please.
Amy Bookbinder, Grove Avenue in Leeds. Hello, I haven't seen some of you for a while. I'm also here to comment on the request by the police chief to accept a donation of firearms and ammunition from our, well, not mine, local Walmart. The mayor tweeted that the city gives no tax breaks to donors to the city. Fine. But surely Walmart will get a tax break, not from Northampton, for such a donation. Walmart is not exactly a generous corporation giving gifts freely without some gain. I find the city even considering this as bad as, well, almost as bad, as allowing the NPD to go to Arizona for training under Arpaio. Unfortunately, most of us were not aware of that until after the fact. Fortunately, though, many Jews, including myself and non-Jews, learned of the chief's plans to go to Israel for training advanced by the once righteous ADL before it happened. A group of citizens representing many throughout the city strongly opposed to the trip met with the mayor and police chief to dissuade them from engaging in such a partnership. They listened and then made what I believe is the right and important decision to say no to the trip. For that, I applaud them and the city of Northampton. Now it's time to say no to Walmart. I believe my daughter's response to hearing about Walmart's offer sums it up, as posted on her Facebook page today. Gross. The city should deny the donation. How about a donation of food for the homeless shelter instead, or pay your workers a living wage? I concur. The city should encourage Walmart to do those things, and the city should not accept firearms and ammunition, tax break or not, from a dirty corporation. Councilors, please vote against accepting a dirty offer, or your vote for it will be in opposition to many across this city and leave you with dirty hands. As a city, we've said no to bad offers before. Let's do it again. Please vote no.
Thank you very much. Good. Anyone else? Yes, Will, and then behind Will, after Will, please.
Blair couldn't be here tonight, so I'm going to read a statement from Blair.
And Will, would you please give your name and address for the record?
My name is Will. I live on River Drive in Hadley. I am recovering from surgery, so I cannot be here tonight. I would like to ask that the City Council not accept this gift of ammunition from Walmart. I take no part in shaming anyone who shops at Walmart. I have shopped there when I needed to. Next to stealing, they do really have the cheapest prices in town. What are we talking about tonight is a corporation giving bullets to a law enforcement institution. This gift is a transaction between two incredibly powerful institutions. This makes it more than a gift bestowed upon a gracious consumer. This makes it a transaction that helps to upkeep the oppressive and deadly labor practices of Walmart and the oppressive and deadly tactics of law enforcement. I have sat in this room many, many times and have witnessed the council pass many non-binding resolutions. They do not go unnoticed, but they are not laws, and they do not distribute or reallocate money. I am more interested in the economics, what you do with the town's money, and who we accept gifts from. This is a chance for all of the councilors who have voiced your concerns about the ammunition industry, about unfair labor practices, about people not being surveilled, to continue that conversation by not hastily accepting the gift of free bullets. These issues are related. Why advocate for police having guns but not 10 cameras on Main Street? Why would you advocate for local workers' rights and resolutions you pass but not for Walmart workers? Please do not accept this gift of bullets from Walmart, and instead, please begin having conversations about why the NPD needs bullets in the first place. It is widely known that owning a firearm increases the chances of someone getting hurt, including the person who owns it. So why are cops walking around with them? Why do you think the NPD should stop endangering their own workers' lives? Let's have these conversations. Thank you for your time, Blair. I would just like to add that the figure is $13,000. That is the retail price, not the price that Walmart has accrued these ammunitions from. I'd like to also add that you guys have already approved the purchases of ammunition through the power of the purse this year. So I think the question needs to be raised. There needs to be a discussion about, is there even a need for this type of gift? I'm going to leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir, and then...
So Andrew Smith, 10 Myrtle Street. So when the issue came up about the body armor and the equipment that police officers need to be safe, I came and I spoke in favor of that because I feel like police officers deserve to have safe working conditions. However, in this instance, I understand that obviously when these stories run in the press, the goal is to generate lots of clicks and lots of arguments and editorials. But however, being that that's the world that we live in and people do pay attention to these things, so I would like to add my 2 cents to that and please encourage you not to accept a gift from the Walmart Corporation in the form of free bullets. And the reason why is echoing what many people have said already, which is that when it comes to statements of values and what we actually believe in as a city, frequently we have the City Council has passed resolutions advocating for stricter, stronger, more more comprehensive gun safety regulations, passed resolutions for greater protection of worker rights, made statements about the importance of downtown Northampton. So even though, so all these things kind of come together, this confluence of like this one sort of reviled corporation and the fact that there's free instruments of harm coming from them. And I understand that like the emotions could go pretty high around the nature of law enforcement. I just feel like when it comes to the question of where we obtain tools that police officers use to operate, just the idea of facilitating a corporate tax write-off for one of the largest, most destructive corporations in our country just really doesn't seem the sort of thing that Northampton should be doing. And this is great. That's why it's so wonderful that we have a city council that can look at it and say no. And I think that would be wonderful if you guys said no. And oftentimes we have all these meetings and there's this back and forth and people come with like emotional outpourings. And it'd just be great if you could just do us all and just not even take it. Just not even spend too much time talking about it. Just don't take it. That's it. And having said that, I would like to follow up on the easement too over in the Woodmont Street area. It's please don't widen the street. And if my understanding is that the proposal is to widen the street, so please don't widen the street. When it comes down to carbon impacts, one of the most detrimental things you can do for long-term sustainability of the city is to invest funds in widening streets. You get more traffic, you get cars traveling more quickly, and the long-term carbon footprint results in greater carbon emissions. So as a community, statements of values are important. So let's commit to maintaining long-term goals of reducing carbon footprint on that issue, and then please stick with the values that have already been articulated by the voters and the citizens of Northampton regarding the bullet issue. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? So Ms. Goldblatt, you have spoken for 3 minutes already.
Yes.
So everyone gets equal time, and unfortunately, people don't get more than the equal time that everyone else gets, so.
It's not for me. It's, somebody texted me a statement and asked me to read it on their behalf. They're a Northampton resident too. Can I read their statement?
Okay, we've had a convention of allowing that, so please, yeah.
So this is a statement from Gregory Goff, full disclosure, he's my husband, and he lives at 140 William Street as well. And he said that he's against taking the Walmart funding for the police because, here's his statement. The fact that we don't have a citizens-led police commission to hold our police department accountable in what trainings they are doing, with which weapons they're doing them, and in which country those trainings are being performed, and spending how much money, is an unacceptable omission in a town that talks about being progressive. Our police department's activities and training ethos does not align with the majority of the citizens who live and work in Northampton, and accepting a donation from Walmart would be a further departure from those values.
Thank you very much. And thank you to Mr. Goff.
The next one is 18217. It's an order to accept a gift of ammunition from Walmart. Order that the City of Northampton accepts the donation of surplus ammunition valued at $13,000 donated to the Northampton Police Department by the Northampton Walmart store in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53A. Do we have a motion in finance?
Motion.
Second?
All right. Mayor will explain.
Certainly. So the local Northampton Walmart, located on North King Street, is discontinuing the sale of ammunition at its Northampton store. And they approached the police department to donate these sort of remnants of their inventory that they will no longer be selling here in Northampton. And so this is an order. It's required under Mass General Law. You've given the police department the authority to accept gifts of personal property up to $5,000, but because the estimated value of this exceeds that, we need to come to council for authorization. This is some of the items we will just destroy, give to the state police to destroy. They're things that our police department wouldn't use. But they will be able to use it for their training and practice that they have to do as part of their certification. So that's basically the background, and I can answer other questions you may have.
So they are required to train on a regular basis with firearms.
That is correct, yes.
And so we would have to buy the ammunition for them to train with anyway.
That is correct, and we, you may recall as part of the capital plan this year, there was an appropriation for tactical supplies, and that included in that is ammunition. And so, and that's something, and you may also recall that over the course of fiscal year 15, 16, and 17, this council approved capital expenditures of approximately $215,000 to build a shooting range in the basement of the police station for firearms training, which we were having to outsource to another vendor to do that. The station had been originally designed to have a shooting range, but we weren't able to actually complete it under the cost constraints of the building. So we did go back, as you know, and invested the additional funds that we needed to retrofit it. So yes, we have an active training facility, and the officers are required to. Obviously, our officers work very hard, as you know, not to have to use their weapons, but we obviously want them to be trained. And part of the training involves when and when not to use their weapons.
So the state requires them to firearms train, and if we don't accept the ammunition, we're going to have to buy it because the state requires them to train.
We are going to buy ammunition for training. The city has bought and will buy ammunition for training. So this is a gift that we can use to supplement those supplies that we purchase on a regular basis.
All right, questions?
Yeah, I have them.
Councilor Labarge.
Thank you. Mayor, I was talking with Nelvis, a resident of mine in Ward 6, and they use the gun range on Ryan Road. And he told me that Walmart does not sell ammunition in our city. Hadley does, so I'm a little confused with this because he said he has to go to Hadley.
Well, as I said, the reason for this gift is that the Northampton store used to sell ammunition, and they've stopped selling ammunition.
When did they stop?
I don't know the exact date. I can't tell you that. I just know that the general manager had this inventory of ammunition left over from whatever period that they were selling it. And so that was the genesis of offering it to the police department.
Now, you also just made a statement, something to the effect that we'll take whatever they have, but if we're not going to use something, what are we going to do with it?
So there are so frequently people who perhaps sometimes they may inherit a home, they may have a parent who passes away, and they may come into possession of a firearm, or they may come into possession of ammunition. It's common that they will often bring it to the police department, and we will destroy them actually through the state police. So I believe there are some boxes that are not types of ammunition that we could use, but they'll be given to the state police for destruction. So, and similarly, you may recall we've had gun buyback programs where people who have firearms in their home can bring them and turn them for destruction. So that's the backstory on that.
Okay, so either which way, how much do our police department, how much money do they ask for on a yearly basis of ammunition, Mayor? What would you say, what would be a round
So,
figure?
as I said, we do this. The way we've been funding it is through this capital appropriation every year for the tactical
Right.
appropriation, which covers, all kinds of equipment. It covers, the actual firearms themselves. It covers other related equipment. It covers, holsters, just all the various things that we may need to outfit a police officer. The actual ammunition purchases, I think looking back just looking quickly at last year, I think it was on the order of probably $8,000 or $9,000 was the total.
Okay.
And again, they have a supply of ammunition that they then, when they use it for training, then they purchase new supplies. So I think that's roughly, and again, that was quickly looking at numbers that we had available for FY18. Something, I think that was about, it was about $8,000 or $9,000. Yeah.
Thank you.
So.
Other questions? Councilor Klein?
I'd like to build a little bit on the questions that Councilor Labarge is starting to touch on, I think. And I know I'm not on the Finance Committee, so I can't take action at this point in the meeting, but I would like to kind of recount some of the questions that I posed to the mayor and the chief of police and the finance director, and the kind of back and forth around it. My main question is this donation going to offset the police department's request in the future year for the budget, for their O&M budget, by $13,000 either next year or in subsequent years? But in order to kind of try to get at that question, I sent an email early yesterday morning to the police chief and to the mayor and to Susan Wright, and I asked if I could please get an accounting of the purchases of ammunition made in the last 5 years of the NPD, as well as an inventory of current ammunition that we have in stock, in storage in the police department. And I asked because I wanted to know how much money has been allocated in the budget for the purchase of ammunition over the last 5 years. And I asked for the information for this meeting, but if not possible, for the second vote on this particular order. And the response that I got from the mayor, I'm going to read it verbatim because it's directly connected to what I would like to propose when this comes to the full council. He wrote, "Dear Councilor Klein, thank you for your email requesting information about NPD ammunition purchases and its current inventory of ammunition. I must respectfully invoke Article 2, Section 2.7 of the City Charter and request that you place this information request on a future City Council agenda for its approval. It has been the longstanding practice of my administration to respond informally to individual requests for information from city councilors. I have only invoked Section 2.7 of the Charter once during my tenure as mayor. I do so again in this case because I believe the scope and substance of your request and the significant time required by city staff to compile it goes beyond the level of information required by the City Council to decide whether it will approve a routine acceptance of a gift of tangible personal property to a city department." So that's kind of the logistics of the request and the response to the logistics of the request. But the mayor also went on to say, "Frankly, I also believe the request conveys a lack of trust in and support of our police department, feeding into a broader anti-police narrative that has seriously impacted the morale of the NPD and its ability to recruit and retain officers. For these and other reasons, I must insist that the full City Council review and approve this information request before I will direct Chief Casper to carry it out." And he copied the president and vice president of the council so that they were aware of the communication. So first of all, I would have preferred that the mayor's response not offer kind of a value judgment about the request and my reason for the request or the implications of my request. And I'm sorry that you saw the request as an expression of a lack of trust in the police department. It was not that. I think it's an appropriate and necessary inquiry so that I can understand if there's a need for a corporate donation from a somewhat questionable corporation for a $13,000 gift of lethal ammunition. And I also, as I mentioned at the very beginning, I wanted to understand if this donation is going to offset the police department's O&M budget next year or in subsequent years for that $13,000. And then just I wanted to talk a little bit about the content. We got a memo from Chief Casper with some detail about what WalMart is proposing to donate. So it includes 80 cases of 12 gauge. And so I did a little bit of research, and also for my own personal knowledge, I think those are shotgun slugs, and it's not my understanding that the NPD uses shotguns. Each case has 10 boxes of 25 rounds each. 80 cases would be 20,000 rounds of shotgun slugs. There's also 35 cases of 20 gauge slugs, also shotgun slugs that are used for hunting mostly. That adds up to 8,750 rounds. One case of 44 magnums. Depending on the size of the boxes in a case, that could be as many as 1 or 2,000 bullets. 7 cases of .410 gauge bullets, which adds up to about just under 2,000 rounds. One case of 38 specials, that's about 1,000 bullets. One case of 45 automatics, that's 600 bullets. 2 cases of .40 bullets, and that comes to just under 2,000 bullets. 7 cases of 22 long rifle comes to 35,000 rifle shots. And then an assortment of individual boxes of other ammunition. So just to clarify for the public, the addition that I did some research and found out how many bullets or rounds were in, or slugs were in each of the amounts of cases that are being suggested as a donation. This isn't information that came to us as part of the memo from Chief Casper. So the total value is estimated to be around $13,000. The majority of this ammunition would be used as training rounds. That's what Chief Casper is telling us. And one question I had here is, why is it an estimated total? Because Walmart surely keeps records of its inventory and the costs of the products that they sell and donate. So I'd like an exact amount, not an estimated amount. So not including the assortment of individual boxes of other ammunition, we have a total of just under 70,000 bullets and slugs. And that's, that's kind of an estimation on my part from reading the list of inventory that would be donated. So some of these things, it sounds like the NPD wouldn't be able to use. And Mayor, you just said that we would be giving those to the state police to destroy or to do something with.
That's my understanding.
My question is, why would we be a pass-through to the state police to destroy things that Walmart as a corporation should be using their own funding for, to do any destruction of ammunition that they're no longer selling? I just don't understand why the NPD would be playing that role as kind of the liaison to the state police for their destruction of things that we can't use. And I'm just curious, what will be used of these donations and why we're receiving things like shotgun rounds when I highly doubt that they're used by the NPD. So those are a bunch of questions that I have that and just kind of the historic expenditure and future expenditure questions that we can't get an answer to before we actually have to do a first and second vote on this, if in fact, I try and rally my colleagues here on the council to submit this as a formal request to the mayor's office. So I will address that when we bring this to the full council, but that's the background to my concerns and thoughts about this donation.
But I have an opportunity to just
please,
respond.
yeah. Why did she directly address that to you so you can respond?
Sure, yeah. Well, I mean, I think in terms of my characterization, I think, what I'm hearing tonight sort of affirms that, because the city council, the city accepts routinely gifts all the time from corporations, from organizations, from businesses, from individuals, and my experience as a councilor and as mayor, I've never had this level of detailed request to understand. So first of all, it's a gift of personal property. So we asked them for an estimate of what the retail value of it was, to understand whether or not it fell within what this council had granted us, the police department, the authority to accept. So that's why we put a value on it. But you're not actually accepting an amount of money. You're accepting an actual, gift of tangible personal property. In terms of this notion that when a gift is received by a department, that we then will immediately offset or cut their budget or offset their department is also unprecedented, I would argue to you. We receive gifts all the time. Smith College just gave a $50,000 gift to the city and to the school department to purchase a van. Smith routinely gives computers to the schools. We get gifts from PTOs. PTOs donate hundreds of thousands of dollars to pay for things. I have never once heard someone say, okay, well, now that the school got this money, we need to reduce their budget, and we need to look into the future and reduce their budget. Frankly, I think any donor who knew that you were going to give a gift to somebody and then you were immediately going to cut the budget by the amount of the gift, I don't think that would be a big inducement to donors. So I do believe that this, I stand by my remarks, and I do believe that this is a particular focus on the police. And I have no issue with that. If you believe that the police should not have firearms and should not do training, that is a perfectly acceptable belief. I'm not going to dispute you on that. But I guess my question is, in terms of what standard are we holding the police department to vis-a-vis other departments in the city and other gifts that we routinely accept? We accepted a military Jeep and a military trailer on behalf of the Veterans Department. I don't remember anybody asking me for a detailed accounting of how many, military hardware or ceremonial hardware the veterans have, and are we going to cut their budget by the value of that gift, next year? So I just, that's why I believe that that's why I did not entertain your information request, and I believe that this is a decision that the City Council needs to make as a whole, because it feels less like information related to accepting a gift and more about an issue about as you go on to count bullet by bullet, how many bullets the police department should have. So those are the reasons why I demurred on responding to your request, and I invoked the charter, which requires actually every information request to be approved by the full body of the City Council, because in fact, the City Council, by the letter of the charter, individual city councilors don't have the power to make such a request on their own. They technically have to have the full body vote on it. Of course, that has not been my practice. I try to provide information when it's requested individually. But I feel like in this matter, given the context, and I do cite the morale of the police department, and it is a real thing, and we are losing police officers to other communities because of some of these issues. So I'm going to just call it out and tell you why I'm concerned about it. And this conversation is exactly that.
Can I respond?
Other questions in finance from
I'd like to
council?
respond to
You would like
the
to?
mayor's
Please do.
First of all, I don't think we have proof of causality of these kinds of conversation as being the reason that we can't maybe recruit or retain officers. So I think that's a bit of a supposition that
Actually,
we can't
we've conducted
back up.
exit interviews with officers, so I can let the chief talk to you about that. But
It'd be useful to have that information. But I think when we talk about gifts, I feel like we're comparing apples to oranges. It's one thing to get a donation of a bus that transports children for educational purposes to bullets that are lethal. They're used for purposes that can kill people. And the police necessarily, I think, do have to come under a particular kind of scrutiny because of the power that they hold and the responsibility that they have in our community is a very particular kind of responsibility. So I think that it's absolutely appropriate to sometimes inquire in a different way about a particular kind of gift. In this case, yes, it is the police department, and it's because it's bullets. It's because I'm wondering why we would need an addition of 70,000 or however many it is, 100,000 bullets, which are used, yes, they're going to be used for training, but is it really going to strengthen the ability of our police force to keep our community safe? And that's kind of an underlying question here that is really different than whether or not we want to transport our kids in a donated bus.
Any other questions from anyone with regards to this financial order? Councilor DeWitt.
Actually, my concern is more about Walmart's end of this, that Walmart gets a write-off on this because it is a donation, and Walmart's donated to other causes in the city, and I believe to the schools as well. Mm-hmm. And there's an assessed value of that. My concern is, of course, they're making this gift. There will be an assessed value based probably on the potential retail of it. We are destroying a large portion of it. They get the bulk of that write-off. Let's say it's $13,000, and we keep $7,000 worth of it, which, in fact, actually, in the long run, in that respect, Walmart, I think, otherwise would either redistribute this to other locations, or they would also have to pay otherwise to destroy it. I don't question the elegant solution theory where they say, well, we have this ammunition, here's a police department, we can donate it and they can use it. But the fact remains that they might be able to benefit from a pretty sweet deal of tax write-off as a donation. So to that extent, their stated value concerns me relative to the value of whatever it is we would keep and retain. There wouldn't be a corollary next.
So I can certainly try to get better specificity on which specific parts of the donation the police department wouldn't use and would turn over to another agency. I don't have that exact information, but I can find that out.
That would be helpful.
Yeah. And again, I don't really know. The tax piece is something between them and presumably everyone who makes a gift to us or to the PTO or to whoever has to put a value on it and figure that out.
Right. Yeah. I understand that. I just don't want to be the enabling agency that allows Walmart to basically pad their books to make, I appreciate any generous offer, although, the altruism is somewhat dubious here. But also, are there, statistically, the lethal use of ammunition and weapons by the Northampton police, or even for discharge of weapons in any circumstance related to anything other than training. I know there are records that, and I know that actually, as far as I know, the exception of dispatching a few rabid raccoons and such like, but there's been I think the last time there was an exchange of gunfire, and actually it wasn't even an exchange of gunfire, the police were on the receiving end of gunfire back in 1978, perhaps, somewhere up around Look Park, a man with a .22 rifle shooting.
Yes, I remember that.
Ira Dunn, as I recall. And to my recollection, and I don't recall any other exchange of gunfire by the this police agency. Doesn't mean it won't happen in the future. Doesn't mean something else could go on. But the fact is, given the context, I would imagine there's some statistics available relative to that would help inform us as we work on this.
I can certainly provide them. I think you're correct. I'm not aware of any shootings, any police having to discharge their weapons. There's certainly been many cases in the time that I've been mayor where we've actually giving commendations to officers who've had weapons pointed at them and have not discharged their weapon. And in some cases they've been BB guns or things like that, and they've been able to defuse the situation. So again, our emphasis is to try not to use lethal force, but obviously, if our police are called on to do that, I'm not sure we would want it to be the first time they fired their weapon in 5 years. You know what I'm saying? That's part of the training, as well as just the situational training that they do in a range situation. It's not just firing into a target. It's also scenario driven to ensure that they do not shoot someone who's a civilian, for example, or misjudge a situation. So there's a lot of training that goes on in that regard as well. So
That's mandated by the state in order, and
yes.
all agencies.
And again, we were renting a trailer that came once a year and having to schedule our officers to do that before we built the range. So now they can do it on a rotating basis.
Councilor Bidwell.
Two points. First, I've had an opportunity to tour the new police station and to see the relatively new police station, and to see the firing range. And I do now have a better understanding of the importance of the use of that range and how it's used, and of course it's required for certifications of individual officers and of the department. But I do understand how that training is probably a good part of the reason why there's not been a discharged weapon outside of the firing range in all these years. And frankly, I'm comforted by the fact that such training is required and that our police department takes that training very seriously. And I would say the bottom line lesson of that training, from what I've seen, is to be incredibly cautious about use of your weapon and be incredibly limited in the circumstances where you would even consider firing it. That's kind of training that I would think we should want for our police department. Secondly, I had in mind a question very much like Councilor Dwight's, which was, would it be possible to determine with the chief how much of this ammo really would be used by the police department versus that which would likely be destroyed? And if that were the case, could the donation to the police department just consist of that which would actually be used, and then Walmart would be on its own to dispose of the rest of it, whether they give it to the state police for destruction, whatever? And that, I agree, I don't want to see us be a vehicle for a $13,000 donation when we're only really going to use $6,000 of that. So I just wondered if it logistically could be divided up into the two pieces.
I can certainly do that. I can try to do that between now and the next meeting. Get a clearer understanding of that, exactly which caliber rounds would not be used by the department, but would be destroyed.
And maybe only directly receive that which we would.
That is correct. And again, we're asking for the authority to accept a gift of tangible property, not a dollar value. Right. So whatever we accept and whatever they don't give us, it'll be up to them to determine with
between them and the IRS.
The IRS as to what they actually gave and didn't give.
Yeah, Councilor Scary, you had a question.
Yes, I can perhaps answer or point you to Councilor Dwight to the information that he was asking about. The open data portal on the NPD's website actually shares a lot of that information with the community, and it has officer-involved shootings from 2000 year to date on there. So I think that's where you could find that information.
Lots of raccoons.
It doesn't talk about raccoons, I don't think, specifically, but.
Councilor Nash, you haven't had a chance yet.
Sure. So, you kind of shot down my idea there, which was
I wasn't shooting down your idea. I was just pointing out that seems to be a clear bias when we're talking about the police department. That's what.
Yeah, well, I want to be clear. That's not coming from me,
okay.
And that also my approach is that budgets are hydraulic, and that if we get a gift in one space in one department, that we can actually go and move that energy, money around to somewhere else where we would like to have some benefit. I mean,
My only thing would be is that a gift is a one-time gift.
Exactly.
A tangible piece of property.
I
It's
got
not
it.
a recurring revenue.
I
So-
understand.
So it doesn't mean that for the FY '20 operating budget, that it's gonna be a change of our revenue for the police, to fund the police department and other, programs. And again, this is not a conversation we ever have about any other gift. I'll just keep saying that.
And I agree. And the timing of this gift, were this gift, if this were to occur while we're having that discussion about what our capital needs are, we would, wow, this is pretty interesting. We're looking at our budget right now, what we need, and here comes, some help from a corporation. It's the fact that, here it is, we're in the middle of the holidays, and we have this gift, it's, of bullets, and that's the thing that is kind of difficult. And that if there were a way through the budget to kind of just say, yeah, we can account for, we're not going to spend this money over here, and we can turn it into something else in the budget. And that would be helpful for me. So that's my thought on that.
Counselor,
Yes, I want to echo Councilor Bidwell. I also felt that way. If we somehow could have Chief Jody Casper look at what they actually need at the police station, that we would go after that, and then let Walmart do what they want to do with the rest. I agree with that. I have to say, being a counselor, and Councilor Dwight, you two with me, Councilor Carney also, we have never had this problem before with the police department or with the fire department, as far as any kind of donations coming in for them. So I'm not having a problem with this. I'm having a problem of how come only the city of Northampton is having a problem with the police department. East Hampton is not, none of them are. I think that this donation at $13,000, which, Mayor, you are gonna go ahead and check this out, of exactly, is it gonna stay at $13,000? Are we going to do what Councilor Bidwell is suggesting? I think that's the right way to go, and hopefully you'll have that information for us.
Certainly. Again, I just want to, keep clarifying that I'm trying to clarify the retail value is relative to whatever they're going to place on it if they're going to take some kind of a deduction, but we're going to try to figure out what stuff can actually be used by Northampton Police, and if there's stuff we can't use, that we'd rather just have them donate that directly to the police or state police, or dispose of it themselves. That's what we're...
Their training, I mean, is it every week that they're using the range?
It's on kind of a rotating basis. Before, they had to schedule people in big blocks because the trailer was only here for a couple of weeks at a time.
Okay.
So people are doing it on a rotating basis. There's a training officer that oversees that and keeps track of all the certifications.
And if I can recall, as an example, we had Smith College also, who donated the laser for going into buildings to search for people and so forth for the fire department. So we get these donations.
We certainly do. Yeah, we certainly get lots of donations, and I think particularly for public safety, we often receive donations of all kinds.
Thank you.
Councilor Scare, you had a follow-up question.
Yeah, well, I wanted to thank Councilor Klein for sort of doing a cataloging, and I feel like it helps give us a scope of what we're talking about. And I'd really rather save Northampton taxpayers' money and have that ammo destroyed or used in the safety of our firing range for mandated trainings than sold over the counter in our community. That's a lot of bullets to be sold over the counter in our community. I'd prefer that Walmart's largesse came in the form of toys or materials for the cruiser care pack program, or car seats for people who can't afford them to be installed by our officers who are certified in installing car seats. But but this is what they're surplusing, and it's something that we would buy otherwise. And I'm just,
Not from Walmart, but we would.
No.
we would
right,
purchase it.
I mean, it's something that we would need to purchase, or we do purchase. So I'm thankful that they're no longer selling that ammunition here in our community or surplusing it to the Walmart in Hadley or somewhere in the region where it would still be out.
Yes, and Walmart does make other donations to the community and gives out grants and.
Yeah, that's true.
Interestingly, the police chief and other officers were in the Walmart parking lot last weekend doing a food drive, and collected over the course of 2 weekends almost a ton of food from Walmart customers, presumably, donating, which then all got transported to the survival center. So, whatever, in terms of, again, this was not, here's a grant for $13,000. It was, here's surplus that you're not selling anymore. So that's really the way this came about.
Any other questions? I mean, from the description of it, this ammunition is not anything they would carry on duty. They carry pretty special things on duty. This is practice ammunition. And what they don't use, they said they destroy.
Cruisers do have, and we do have shotguns in our
Oh,
inventory.
we do, yeah. So they would use that.
It's not the service revolver, but we do have shotguns.
And
so this ammunition could be used.
I mean, if we turn them down, Walmart's very likely to take this $13,000 of ammunition to Hadley and sell it. And say, okay, Northampton, you don't want it, we're gonna take it to Hadley and sell it. Which is a pretty possible outcome of what happens to it if we don't want it. Which means it's out there somewhere, and none of it gets destroyed, so.
Or donate it to another police.
Or give it
agency.
to another, give it to state police or another police department. Hadley might be very happy to have it, so it's going somewhere. It doesn't go here. Any other questions in finance? Hearing none, then we have a positive recommendation that's been made and seconded. All in favor of that recommendation in finance, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
Next is 18217, in order to accept gift of ammunition from Walmart. Motion to approve this and get it on the floor for discussion.
Move approval?
Seconded by Councilor Labarge. So this is on the floor. Discussion? Councilor Klein.
I was hoping to see this referred to city services that has incorporated public safety into its purview for further discussion, but also to have the committee consider forwarding to the mayor the request for information so that we can get more information about what the budget has looked like historically with regard to the purchase of ammunition, and moving forward, how it might offset the budget, the O&M piece of the police budget. So I would like to make a motion that this be referred to city services.
Okay, so I hear that motion to refer. Is there a second? Councilor Dwight.
I'll second the motion for purposes of discussion.
Does the chair of city services like to comment?
As chair of city services, it wouldn't be uncommon for us to take up matters like this. Just as a logistical matter, I think the police chief is meeting with us at the first meeting in January. And, since we'd already be meeting with her, it would be timely and a way to answer some of those questions, or maybe have a discussion about the information request that Councilor Klein had hoped might come from the council.
For myself, I certainly see that as a reasonable course of action. I heard a lot of questions from almost everyone in the city council this evening. I'd be more comfortable if we could discuss it further before acting. So, any other comments on the motion to refer the city services? Mr. Mayor, do you want to comment?
Just, again, to comment that this is unprecedented, and I'll just keep saying it again, it's not standard practice to refer gifts to a committee, and I'm just disappointed that we couldn't treat this like other gifts and have a conversation about it, and so, and it's, again, I'll just stand by my remarks earlier.
That was a good one.
I think it's really unnecessary. I too find it surprising and disappointing that we are singling out this particular donation to this particular department for such scrutiny when nothing like that has ever been done before. And I do think we need to be cognizant as the legislative body for the city of the impact on morale in our police department. It is a real thing. You may know that every year on a rotating basis, one of the city councilors sits in on the committee or on the interview committee that the police department puts together to talk to potential new recruits, candidates to become police officers. And I was the one this year. And I can say that in interviews with 8 candidates that I sat in on, the question of how the police are perceived by the community and morale issues came up in every single conversation. So not only do exit interviews show that the morale in our police department is an issue when officers choose to depart, it's also an issue when we go out to recruit and we want to get the best possible candidates. So I think that we should be very, very careful in thinking about the messages that we're sending to the community, the messages that we're sending to our police officers in singling out an item like this for such unusual scrutiny, when in fact it is merely receiving by donation ammunition that would otherwise be used anyway. I just think it's inappropriate to provide such unusual scrutiny to this particular situation.
Councilor Dwight.
Well, this is unusual, though. Unusual I mean, clearly there's a community concern. I wouldn't characterize it as it has been characterized, that the community in the main, but the fact is that we're not talking about school books, we're not talking about buses, we're talking about lethal systems that we acknowledge and recognize that the police department needs to be trained on and is required. And as the circumstances are, this is how we do public safety. This is how public safety is established in the community. There are questions that are relative to this. As I said, there was our concern relative to a large corporation making a donation and possibly benefiting from their largesse, and I do put that in quotes, while we, on the other hand, probably don't get the benefits that they would actually realize financially. I have a problem with that, and I think that warrants further discussion. But we're also talking about a department, fairly or not, that is still actually charged. I mean, there's only one group that's under the employ of the city of Northampton that actually has the right to carry a gun and has the authority to shoot and kill citizens. So that actually warrants a special consideration. I do understand and appreciate the point about the impact on morale. I've also participated in those police interviews. And the fact is that police should understand and realize that they do come under special scrutiny for that very reason. Some people prefer not to work in this department because this community does have that level of scrutiny. Other communities which haven't expressed too much concern about that, they maybe would be more inclined to go to them. I think that you don't get a pass. I think it is an enormous responsibility to become a law enforcement officer. And one of those big, enormous responsibilities is the fact that you have lethal authority over people. Teachers don't have that, fire department doesn't have that, DPW doesn't have that. We, I think, in the main, as a community, require a police department to work and exist within our our community because of the problems that present themselves. There has been an ongoing debate that's been triggered by any number of items that come before the council. The fact remains is that I, for one, subscribe to the notion that police department actually is valuable, and our police department actually is an excellent police department. That said, it goes with the territory, as it were. So I don't think, look, we sent a number of things to committee that I didn't particularly get excited about, that was also unprecedented in the past, and we made it, we survived. I don't think that this is going to be any worse than any of those discussions. There will be lots of things said. There will be emotional discussions relative to it. And usually, of course, it's speaking to a larger issue, focusing on a smaller item, usually a capital item, oddly enough. But I mean, that is the nature, and we've said this before, that is the nature of this body, that's the nature of governance, it's the nature of democratic process, and I don't have a problem with this going to committee for further analysis.
Thank you. Any other, Councilor Labarge and then Councilor Klein.
Why couldn't, instead of going to city services, why couldn't we have a finance committee meeting?
Counselor, if you're directing that generally,
To you,
as you know, public safety, the jurisdiction of the old Public Safety Committee was taken over by City Services. I believe you served on public safety, and I think every committee, if I'm not mistaken. So you know that well. And I think that would be the rationale, and Finance has already voted on it today. So, do you have further questions?
My question is, though, we're hearing about what she got for the amount on her research versus how much she got versus how much money is involved here with her research, and then getting the exact quote from Chief Jody Casper of what she needs and what she does not need. And I think once we find that out, there will be a significant change in that amount of money. So to me, that's finance.
Okay.
Whatever.
And, okay, no, fair enough. And I'll just say that, you know, we're discussing referral. I like to try to put it in perspective. I mean, discussing something is not a punitive measure. Not to me. It's our job. And I think the concern is that by discussing it further, that sends the wrong message. Let me say that that is not the message that I send tonight. But I do think it is appropriate for the council to think about the questions that almost every member of the council have posed when they are posed. And as council president, it's my hope to facilitate a discussion about those questions. I feel that's my responsibility, and I think it's our responsibility as well. So I don't see it as a punitive thing. I don't see it as decisive. Okay? So I don't think it's that big a deal personally. Other discussion? Councilor Nash has not spoken. Okay, Councilor Nash?
So my concern is that, you know, last year, we went through several rounds of police equipment. We went through cameras, we went through tactical gear. Now we're talking about ammunition, and I think towards the end of one of those discussions last year, we were kind of like, you know what, this is not the way to do it. That when we have these discussions about one particular item, we are not inviting the better conversation. And that my concern is that we're going to do that again, and that I think we're going to end up. And the bigger question for us is, the way I see it, is how we, as citizens, relate to our police department, and that there is a struggle around that for some citizens in Northampton. And that there's distrust, and that we're not going to get it by talking about these bullets. and I, again, think that that is the route to go at some point. And maybe starting tonight or in the new year. But I think if we send this to committee, we're going to end up in much the same place. And I don't think it fares well for our police department, and I don't think it fares well for us. So that's my thought on it. I don't think I don't think it's going to benefit us to go to committee with this. But at the same time, we got to realize that there's a discussion we probably should have.
Okay, so Councilor Klein wanted to be recognized, and also the mayor is waiting. So I will defer to Councilor Klein unless she wishes to.
It's fine. if
Okay,
you want
Mr.
to
Mayor.
speak.
I just wanted to clarify that, I was not saying that sending something to committee was unprecedented. I guess what I'm trying to say is that if the council wants to have a public policy discussion about whether or not our police should be armed or shouldn't be armed, or, it seems like the budget process is a process where you can decide that you don't want to build a shooting range, or you don't want to outfit police with equipment and guns and et cetera. That's certainly within your right. I guess what I'm saying is that it feels like this hearing, or it just feels like this gift item of a gift of something that the police already have and already purchase and already utilize, is being used, or is going to be extrapolated into some larger policy discussion. So, and I just feel like that's the concern that I have about it. So, and actually I'm frankly regretting that I even agreed to accept the gift, and probably should just withdraw it and tell Walmart to give it to another community. Because again, my concern is I can write the script for the hearing already. I've been there, I've been in the middle of it, I understand, and I understand what it's, some of the comments I heard tonight, frankly, are outrageous. The characterization of our police officers as violence workers, when in fact, most of our police officers receive more training in social services and drug intervention, and so anyway, that's my concern. So, and I'm just going to express my concern, and
we hear you.
I'm on the record.
Look, I have to try and shape this discussion a little bit. There are 9 members of the City Council debating this. Members of the public who may have said whatever they're going to say speak for themselves. I don't want this to turn into a polemic for or against the police. This is about a straightforward acceptance of a gift, yes or no. And in questions, I heard questions from every councilor, even though some who are in favor of the referral and some who are against it. I heard questions from both people. If it's referred to committee, the goal is to discuss the gift. It is not to have a wide-ranging discussion about policing. It is not in any way about whether or not police should be deprived of their guns. That's simply, I didn't hear any member of the City Council say that. It's important to reassure the public if there's a concern about that. That's not what this is about. Maybe some people want that. I don't. That's not my goal. My goal is to have proper process around this issue that's come before the City Council, and I'm hearing that people want to discuss it further. I want to be clear about that. That's what we're talking about. This is not a broad issue about whether police should carry guns or large public safety issues in America. This is about a gift order. Okay, so now I'm a little bit lost. I think Councilor Klein was next, and then Councilor Dwight.
Well, I just want to remind everyone that when I suggested that this be referred to city services, that my goal was to see if we don't have a mechanism by which the council today could make a suggestion or take a vote on whether or not to submit a request for information from the mayor.
Okay, we can't yell at each other.
So instead of, because that's not an option, and because this vote in its first and second vote would happen before we were actually able to consider whether or not, as a council, we wanted to submit a request for information to the mayor, I thought that I would refer it to city services so that city services could take up, because a committee can make that recommendation or make that request for information, really. I was hoping that city services would grapple with that question and decide whether or not they were willing to submit some questions to the mayor for follow-up before we make a decision about the gift.
Just around that? I mean, Councilor, I just heard also the mayor say then, is it appropriate for a committee to make an information request? Or just the entire council? Maybe I'll direct that to the mayor.
Well, I can answer. I think there is a little bit of gray area there, to be honest. As I read the charter, it's the whole council that has to vote. However, if you look at our rules, I think there's kind of a vestige from the old rules that sort of attempts to delegate that to a committee. I don't know whether that holds or not, to be honest. I think that was originally an intent that they could ask those questions. But I could see the solicitor weighing in saying, no, it has to be the full council.
Well, I certainly remember that committees that I've been on, the Committee for Community Resources, for instance, was able to put in requests for information from city department heads when we were talking about downtown economy. So there's certainly precedence for that happening. You know, I think that was my thinking behind why, if we sent it, in fact, to city services could make that request for information.
I just want to say that my typical position is we provide information to committees, to individual counselors. You know, I will say Article 2, Section 2-9 is 7 is a state law, so it's I believe it would be superior to council rules. But I'm going to say that I'm not sure why then you couldn't continue. You know, if you put it on the agenda as an information request, why you couldn't continue the item until you receive the information, if this information is so critical to the decision. Again, I'm concerned about that as well, as I've said to you, because it, again, feels like it's more about a larger issue, which you can certainly talk with the chief about and your regular, meeting with her in terms of these concerns. So that's what I would say in terms of that.
Well, Mr. Mayor, let me ask you, are you suggesting that the item would be continued from today until the next council meeting, whereupon the council could consider an up or down vote on an information request?
The question would be, you've got 2 readings between now and then. And so you could take a reading tonight, and then on second reading, you'll have the information request. And if the information request is adopted in some form, then you could delay a second reading until you had the additional information. I mean, it's not uncommon for the council on second reading to say we need more information and defer a second reading. So, happens all the time. That is, in fact, not, common. So, the question for me is, what I find unprecedented is sending a gift request. So, that's all.
Okay, I guess, Councilor, well, I think you relinquished the floor, so I'm going to, Councilor Bidwell, please, then you can go.
It's been said that I was one of those councilors that had questions, too. I did have a very specific question, but my question was answered. My question to the mayor was, would it be possible to have the police chief determine which of this ammunition would actually be used by the police department in ways that they would normally be using it anyway, and which would not be used and therefore available for destruction? And the answer was yes, that he'd be glad to provide that information. And the second was, then could we just have the police department receive only that which would be used? Therefore, theoretically, they could take a deduction only for that, so we wouldn't be enabling them to take a padded deduction. And then they're on their own to dispose of the other ammo. And the answer that I got to that question was yes. So as far as I'm concerned, my questions have been asked and answered to my satisfaction, and I don't think that this is the time, or a city services committee meeting would be a time to tackle the larger question of what is this community's view of the role we want for our police department to have, and do we want our police department to be armed? This is not the time for that, nor would a committee conversation about a donation be the time for that?
The committee would not be considering the larger question of whether the police should be armed in Northampton.
Just as we're not theoretically considering that tonight, but nevertheless, we know how these conversations proceed.
Councilor Shara had her hand raised, and then Councilor Dwight.
Just to Councilor Bidwell's point,
Oh, I skipped.
the
Sorry.
the questions may have been answered, but if the present order was separated out into what could be destroyed and what could be donated, then that would be a different order. So it would have to be an amended, significantly amended order. It would have to be a different order than what we have before us.
Point taken, yes. And I think I heard a willingness on the mayor's part to make that kind of adjustment.
Between now and second reading, definitely.
Councilor Dwight.
Just to be clear, as the council president indicated, I mean, I have a feeling that people are conflating the public comment with debate on the council floor. And the council floor, we are basically focused on the items as they're presented in the agenda. We sometimes stray. We're straying a little bit now, I suppose. But the fact is that the debate, as such, is a debate on the item that's on the agenda. And that's how we vote. What I'm hearing is not said overtly, but I'm hearing sort of tacitly implied, is that the public comment is the one that makes people feel most uncomfortable, that the emphatic public comment is the thing that gives people a certain disquietude. One, I understand that. Two, we don't control that. We shouldn't control that. And the fact remains is we shouldn't predicate decisions, good, bad, or indifferent, on essentially things that are said necessarily in public comment. They inform, or they provoke, or whatever, but the fact is then we are charged as a representative body to make decisions predicated on the information we have in hand. So in that respect, I don't think, I mean, 2 points. One, I have absolutely no problem with going to committee to discuss some of the questions that we've discussed. I would say that, and I'm not a member of that committee, but I would say that I would not be in favor of the information request because I don't think it's at that point it is, I have not heard anything that would actually inspire me to vote in favor of it, but that could change, which is why we have these things. So we had this discussion somewhat when back on the camera discussion when things were by the two objectors right now wanted to refer to committee for further discussion, and then I remember arguing the opposite side, as I recall, and Councilor Nash and Councilor Bidwell arguing in opposition to me to sending something, making the same points that I'm making now. So I appreciate the irony there. But the fact remains is that this is what this is. This is what this messy little process is. And our responsibility is to make reasonable and sound and fair decisions. And the fact that there's a motion attached to it should not scare us from having the discussion.
So Councilor Klein had been waiting to be recognized.
The discussion's gone in so many different directions at this point that I'm kind of far away from where I wanted to make a comment before.
Yeah, this is to the referral.
The kind of inventory that I did and figuring out exactly how many bullets and rounds we are talking about wasn't just an empty exercise. It was because I wanted to understand what the amount of lethal munitions is that we're talking about, because I think there is something significant in that. And that's also why I wanted to understand what the NPD has in stock now, how much is used, how long this would last, how it would affect the budget in the future. These are all questions. They're not just antagonistic questions to express my anger at policing in the United States or in our city. They're very concrete questions that I wanted answers to make a reasoned decision on whether or not this is a gift that we need to accept. Do we need to accept 70,000 bullets in our community? And so I tried to find an elegant way to make sure that some of those questions get answered by trying to have this referred to city services. That's what I'm hoping will happen. I think necessarily, you end up in policy discussions and philosophical discussions and political discussions from the strangest of places sometimes. Sometimes it so happens that a question about a donation triggers questions that are philosophical in nature and make us ask questions about what we want for our community and what we don't want for our community. And I think that's okay. We've been told a number of times this evening that, this has never happened before with a donation or a gift, that this is just de rigueur. And, at different times, different things come up that trigger questions, and I think that that's appropriate. And I stand by this referral, this idea of referring to city services, and I hope people will see it as what it is, not an attempt on my part to create a referendum about the Northampton Police Department.
Any other discussion? To reiterate, I think some people observe politics at all levels and they think sending something to committee is sending it into the wilderness. To Councilor Dwight's point, that is not the case or the intention here. There are honest questions being asked. We should have a process where we can have a real discussion about that. So I'm fine supporting a motion to refer this to a city council committee. And to me, it's very simple. I have faith that the chair of city services and the members of city services will look at the question professionally and in detail. So, and I don't think we're making much headway now. So I think this would be a good approach. So, any other discussion, Councilor Murphy? Councilor Murphy asks we roll call. Oh, Councilor Labarge.
I just wanted to ask you a question,
Sure.
Councilor. Of course. Now, we have city services is what, January 7th?
Whatever the first Monday of January.
Is it?
I would have my calendar.
Is it? Okay. So, we have city council on January 3rd. So we would not be doing that second vote on the 3rd, correct?
It would be in committee.
We actually wouldn't be doing either vote, would have referred it at this point.
Correct, yes.
So right now, we'd have referred it.
I know that. So, which means the second reading would be on January 17th.
Any other questions? So there's a request for a roll call, and I'll ask for roll of council. On the question of referring the order to accept a gift to the Committee on City Services.
Councilor Dwight,
Yes.
Councilor Klein,
Yes.
Councilor Labarge,
Yes.
Councilor Murphy,
No.
Councilor Nash,
No.
Councilor O'Donnell,
Yes.
Councilor Shara,
Yes.
Councilor Bidwell,
No.
Councilor Carney. Yes.
Okay, the referral passes.